Hi, everyone. I've started the recording for our program on virtual volunteerism. A couple things. I always get asked if we're sharing the slides. You will receive the slides, so have no fear about that. And you will also receive a recording for this program in case you miss any other information. I'll be giving the presentation, but I'll also stop sort of every few seconds, every few slides, just sort of see if anyone is posting any questions in the chat room. Please forgive me. Usually we have two people kind of doing this together. Today it's going to be me presenting as well as keeping an eye on the chat and the questions. Thanks for the message on good morning. I appreciate it. Good morning to you, Josie. Like checking in. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions, again, please put them in the chat or in the questions box. We will be keeping an eye out on both of those. I'm going to also take myself off a video just so you can have the full screen with the slides. I think it'll be easier that way for everyone to see the full slides. Okay, so this is our presentation on virtual volunteerism, a sort of a look at where we are right now, 20 ideas to help you engage volunteerism, and then looking ahead. I want to also make sure, I'm just keeping an eye on my audience view to make sure that you guys can see the slides. I think everyone is good so far. So this is what we're hoping to cover in today's conversation. What's our current reality? What's the data showing? Some quick assessment questions about your volunteer program, some virtual volunteer ideas and in-person safe volunteering ideas. I'm going to do a quick demo and show you how to add a virtual volunteer need to the Giving DuPage portal site or edit an existing need that you have there to become a virtual one. And then we'll look ahead in terms of sort of expectations, preparation, redefining what volunteerism really looks like, and then how Giving DuPage can serve in our connector role to promote and engage volunteers and recruit volunteers. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my voice and I have no reason to do that. Couple of data points. All of these slides I'll be showing on data come straight from VolunteerMatch. They have produced a couple of ebooks that you can easily download from their website, volunteermatch.org.com. Anyway, VolunteerMatch has a couple of ebooks, and they did survey they sent out a survey to over, I think, 100 participants, and they had, I think, over 700 responses back. The responses came from nonprofit organizations, companies, volunteers, individual volunteers, and other organizations that they work with on volunteering. This should come as no surprise. They asked a few basic questions, and they actually had two data points, one that happened in March and one that happened in May. And this first question was just really, what is the current status of your nonprofit organization? And as you can see, only about 1 in 5 of organizations, about 19%, were operating with the same or more resources as pre-COVID. The rest are basically operating, 57%, 23%, 57% operating with reduced resources, and 23% temporarily halted operations due to COVID. And they also had a 1% metric that showed permanently halted operations. So in other words, organizations that closed their doors. In our area, I don't think we've had, as far as I know, organizations that have completely closed their doors, but we most certainly have had many organizations temporarily halt their operations, and the vast majority, I think this is a much higher majority of organizations operating with reduced resources. I think a lot of people know that their staff are they've either cut staff has been furloughed, programs and services have been cut back or adjusted. And at the same time, if your organization is an essential service organization providing food, housing, healthcare and medication support, other things that are considered sort of essential human services, the demand for your organizations has gone way up. Mental health services, counseling services, issues dealing with abuse and neglect. The demand for your services has gone way up, and yet at the same time, some of you also might be operating with less resources on hand. So this is just the reality of where we are. And I don't think this is coming as a surprise to anyone who's on the call today. This is a really good statistic that talks about how volunteerism has completely changed in terms of just attendance and participation. So this question was asked of nonprofit organizations and companies who are heavily invested in corporate social responsibility activities. In March, 93% had reported some or heavy cancellations of volunteer attendance. By May, that number improved a little bit to 80%, but still, you can see that is just the entire bottom coming out from underneath an organization. So you're not alone if you feel like you went from having a volunteer program or volunteer activities to none at all. You're not alone. These are the barriers that were reported in the Volunteer Match Information and Survey that volunteers expressed when they were sharing their concerns about volunteering. Again, no surprise that the vast majority of them feel like it was fear of being exposed to illness or fear of exposing others to illness were the top two reasons, quickly followed by changing regulations or recommendations that govern large gatherings. Additional things like time constraints or fear of social stigma also made the list. And there was still a good percentage of people who felt like by May, they kind of were more clear on how they can give their time. Last slide, I think, on data here is adjusting to virtual volunteering. This is basically an indicator of organizations that have adjusted their volunteer engagement strategy. Some reported we have not made any adjustments to our volunteer engagement strategy. And the gray bar is the March data point and the blue bar is the May data point. We have begun creating more virtual volunteer opportunities. We have begun creating more in-person volunteer opportunities. You can still see that number is quite low. And other is basically signified as we've suspended all of our volunteer activities until further notice. I think the question for you is really identifying where are you, where does your organization fall in these four categories? We have not made any adjustments. We have begun to create more virtual volunteer opportunities, some in-person opportunities, or are you continuing to halt or suspend volunteer activities until further notice? I gotta say, I feel like this adjustment or creating virtual volunteer opportunities has come very slow in our area. I am just starting to see organizations post more virtual volunteer opportunities, and it's part of the reason why we wanted to host this program. Let me go ahead and just take a pause there to see if we have any questions in the chat room. So far, I'm seeing none that I can see that have been posted, and please, again, feel free to keep posting them in there. But otherwise, I don't see any, so I'll just keep going. The next, so this is, I think the data is really important because it helps us to establish where are we today. We not only have to just accept this painful reality of a complete shift to our volunteer engagement and our volunteer programs, but we have to embrace this reality. And I mean, like, accept it to the core of our bones, because it will only help us reach innovative solutions faster. The quicker we accept and embrace where we are, the faster we can get to a better place of adjusting. Here's a couple of assessment questions that only you will know the answer to, but I would like to share these out loud. These are going to really be important in terms of how does your organization respond And how will your organization adjust? The answers will not, and the response will not be the same for every organization. It'll be very, very different. So how is a volunteer defined at your organization? Are they viewed as a helper, an extra pair of hands, or a resource? Or are they really viewed as an advocate, an ambassador, a donor, a supporter? As you know, many, many, many volunteers are also donors, or vice versa. Many donors are also volunteers. Your volunteers are ambassadors to your organizations and true advocates for your cause. What is the value or importance of volunteers within your organization? Are they critical to your mission? Again, for some of you, you recognize that volunteers can be helpful, but you haven't done a great job recruiting them. For others of you, volunteers are mission critical, like needed just every single day of your mission. There's a big difference in sort of where do volunteers play a role in your organization, and then going forward, how critical will volunteers be to your mission? If you said yes, volunteers are very important and very valuable. The next questions I have for you are you or your staff willing to take on more effort and resources to retain and engage the best volunteers from your organization who have dropped away? This is a real question because you will not be able to retain or engage your best volunteers without taking more on yourself in the short term. If your bandwidth is completely full, you're probably not going to be able to retain your volunteers from before as well as you can if you devote some time to it. How important are volunteers going to be in the future of your organization? Are you and your staff prepared to take on more to recruit new volunteers, especially with a reduced staff capacity for many of you? And also from a remote workplace sort of operation, are you ready to do more and take on more? And is your team ready to redefine what volunteer support looks like in your organization for the next few years? And maybe forever. The definition of what volunteering looks like is still a little bit up for grabs right now. Before you start creating virtual volunteer needs, I recommend a few things. Create a parking lot document where you continually, sorry, I had the word document before, but I went away. Create a parking lot document where you continually add virtual volunteer needs. There could just basically create a Word doc that you constantly refer to. You can pin that Word doc, keep it saved, keep it open, keep it in your most recent documents. There can never be too many ideas, and no virtual volunteer idea is too simple or too simplistic or too basic. And you'll understand why in a minute. Make a list of projects you and your team have wanted to accomplish. They've been on the to-do list for years, but you never had the time. This is the document where you add all of your wish list ideas for now. Even if you don't start recruiting to complete some of those wish list ideas, add them to your parking lot document. Make a list of your and your staff's skills gaps. Start creating volunteer needs, virtual volunteers needs based on that. For example, oh gosh, we're really bad with social media, or spreadsheets are like my Achilles heel. They're my kryptonite. I really could use help from a person who knows spreadsheets better. So start making a list of all of those skills gaps because you can create virtual volunteer needs around those gaps. Obviously, you can see the theme here. We are focusing on skills-based or pro bono volunteer needs because those are the ones that many people can do virtually and ones that you can implement quickly. Traditional in-person volunteering looks very, very different from February of this year. And I think we have to let go a little bit of our notion of traditional volunteering. And then also make a list of everyday routine repetitive tasks that can be broken down into many different volunteer needs, and then ask yourself or figure out if you can convert those little tasks to virtual. For example, is there a monthly report that your organization has to generate? Well, can that be a volunteer job that you post, as long as you give access to the volunteer to that system? What about sending thank you letters or cards or making phone calls, researching different vendors for a better price? These are some of the things that you can start thinking about, but definitely start creating this, what I call parking lot document, and then just keep adding projects or skills gaps or wish list items or routine tasks that you can enlist a volunteer for. This is how you will identify your organization's virtual volunteer needs. I'm going to take a pause there for a second just to check the chat and make sure there are no questions. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat room or, oh, yes, got it. So there was a question on the slide about what is meant by social stigma. So I think I don't know because that survey wasn't something that we created. It was done by VolunteerMatch, and unfortunately they didn't provide a lot of definition. I had a question as well on what they meant by money and income concerns, but the social stigma I think is associated with, like, should you even be volunteering in person right now at all? Is it responsible to do so? But again, that's a speculation. It's an easy question to ask a volunteer match, but I didn't ask it because it was a low response on the response scale. The other barriers that existed were sort of the obvious ones of exposure to illness or regulations on large gatherings. It was a very low response rate of 5%, but that's a great question, Linda, and thanks for asking. And I think you had that was one of the reasons. Yep, got it. I got that one. So I see no other questions right now, so I'm going to keep going forward. So here we go. I promised at least 20 virtual volunteer ideas. Now, some of these I promise you, some of these are things your organizations might already be doing, and some of these are some different ones, and some of these you might have been, might have already occurred to you, but I haven't seen a lot of these virtual volunteer needs come through on our volunteer portal site. So for example, volunteer writers is a really great virtual activity. Have someone help you write press releases or copy for your flyers or blog posts, or even grant writers. And maybe there's not a lot of virtual volunteer grant writers, but maybe they can help with certain sections of grants that you always need help with, like narratives or design outcomes or the budget documents. Those are all critical pieces to applying for grants, and I think a lot of us are trying to apply for the same and more grants than we ever have before. Digital marketing is another one that is a huge virtual volunteer need. Posting on social networks or help with your e-newsletters. This is the time to recruit for a videographer, photographer, editor. How about just getting started on YouTube, like posting videos on YouTube or creating a playlist or learning what does it take to have a channel of your own. These are all virtual volunteer ideas. This is another virtual volunteer idea around technology skills. So I think a lot of us needed this volunteer early on when we became overnight Zoom experts, right? But what if there is a Zoom teacher to show your clients, to show the people you serve, to show some of your other volunteers how to Zoom away? This is an example of how this was done successfully. There is an executive director from a senior center. I think this is in New Jersey, but I'm not exactly sure. That said one of their biggest programs is offering education programs to their seniors. Very common thing, right, for senior centers having education programs, but all of a sudden, obviously, seniors couldn't come into the center anymore. So they decided to enlist college volunteers to offer tech support and Zoom classes to professors and to his seniors that they serve during the transition. So a team of remote volunteers worked with hundreds of seniors. I think it was like 200 seniors that was referenced in the article. And they introduced them to Zoom. And why did they introduce them to Zoom? Because then the seniors could sign up for classes that were now going to be virtual and completely online. They were very concerned about, would this work? Like, if we had volunteers teaching seniors how to Zoom away, will that work? And instead of having about 200 registrants for their classes, they had more than 500 seniors sign up for classes. This was a definite game changer on how the pandemic will actually improve the way this organization interacts with the people they serve. This was just a clever way to think out of the box very early on. Hey, how do we get people to teach how to use Zoom, since it's going to be a part of our future for the foreseeable future? Like for the foreseeable months, like, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to adjust. And I thought this was a really timely example. I can imagine, as can you, that for this senior center, that probably was not an easy thing to do. Even when you're recruiting volunteers, virtual volunteers to help you, it automatically demands more of your time. But they made an investment in that volunteer experience and that volunteer project, and this is the results that they got. These are some of the volunteer needs posted on our website right now under virtual volunteer needs. I think the Girl Scouts are on this call. They did a great job on posting a couple of virtual volunteer needs. They have this one as well as another one, because they're looking for mentors who are good at teaching one specific skill or skills to their students, to the Girl Scouts. I'm sorry, my office line is ringing. It's distracting, and I can't turn the ringer off quickly. And then also answering phone calls, right? So this happens to be an organization that's very focused on vehicle repairs, but they're saying, please answer our phone calls and take vehicle donation offers virtually. Virtual online coaches and tutors and mentors are a great thing right now. Just a couple of ideas. A few more. This one happens to be a really big volunteer need for nonprofit organizations, because even in this virtual time, this remote working from home time, we always still need graphics design being done for our programs and services. A lot of us are not great with design apps, right? Whether it's Canva or Photoshop, but what if you post a virtual volunteer need to see if you can find someone great? Boy, a lot of us are working on this now too, right? Like, how do I develop a very strong diversity, equity, inclusion policy? How do I engage young people in helping me implement some of these ideas? This is a timely virtual volunteer opportunity, but one that can be very exciting for your organization if you choose to post something like this. What about using volunteers to review applications? So this is another need that's posted on our website. Happens to be for a pet shelter, and they're talking about adoption application review volunteers wanted. But it could be for anything, right? You could be reviewing applications for any number of things. Also, I don't know if your organization is doing this, but I know that I'm trying to do more of this. I'm trying to do more virtual outreach presentations to different types of groups, whether they're businesses or faith groups or community groups. What if your organization posted a volunteer need, not just to find someone who can help you contact different companies and groups to schedule presentations, but what if your organization also posted and sought to hire virtual outreach presenters? So you could offer training around that and then have more people doing outreach on your behalf. This particular idea actually works really well right now because all of us are virtual all the time, and there's a lot of organizations, libraries, again, houses of worship, who are looking to fill their virtual programming with meaningful cause-related information and organizations. So this might very well be a possible idea. I'm going to take a pause there and see if there's a few more questions. Here's a new one. From your view at the portal, have you seen a decrease in volunteer interest since many Americans are out of work and need an income rather than the privilege of time to volunteer? So this is a good question, and the answer that we have found is no, not at this time. There still seems to be a lot of engagement around volunteering. I was just on a different meeting earlier, like an hour and a half ago, with a chamber, and this chamber has a corporate social responsibility committee, and those companies were looking to understand, because they too have invested a lot of time in engaging in community efforts, and so they're trying to figure out how can they give back that's beyond monetary right now. And we do get calls all the time. For example, I had a volunteer who was incredibly frustrated because she was really interested in making a difference, but she didn't know how to do so virtually. And she was a senior and she wanted to give back, but she just couldn't connect to a virtual volunteer opportunity. So this has not been our experience yet. I'm sure it's true for many people because they are out of work. And so a priority is to find jobs. By the way, don't forget, you can also post jobs at the portal. While they don't seem like there are many of those, there are actually organizations who are hiring. So if you have a job or an internship experience, you can post that at the volunteer portal as well. I can show you how to do that in a minute. Anyway, so that has not been our experience so far. I'm going to check the chat to make sure. I think we're good there. Couple of other ideas. Volunteers, this is a really important and great way to engage volunteers. Have them get involved with sending your thank you letters or making thank you calls. You can provide a thank you script. They can handwrite a letter. They can mail to donors and supporters. You can put together an entire kit and send the whole box or drop it off to the volunteer's house. A version of this was done by one of the charities, a charity that I talked to early on, like probably back in May. They converted their race that they had to a virtual race. And so they put together like basically fundraising kits. So they put together sort of like a like a donor letter, because they had the letters, they had the donor information from the years before. And so they basically put together like an entire box or a kit that they would mail. They mailed to like 15 volunteers to help the volunteers, use the volunteers to help them solicit donations for their race. And they had a very successful outcome from it. So you can make this, writing thank yous or making calls, as long as you provide a script to them, that's something that really can work for your organization. Another idea is research projects. So often, we find ourselves like in other times, hey, I wish I could research like this particular idea associated with my cause or these outcomes, if I could only dig a little deeper. Now's the time to put on your parking lot document, your wish list document, research projects that you could use volunteers for. You never know if you can get volunteers to help you, but this is the time to ask for them. Or if you have a crisis hotline, or is there a way to offer training to help with the clients hitting the crisis hotline through remote appointments? So again, don't forget that you may have to train volunteers a little bit more at this time, but there are some great volunteer needs that you can create that can all happen remotely at this time. This is another one. This is one that's on a lot of people's lists. What about just translators, right? So this is a real need posted on our portal site right now. They serve Spanish-speaking clients, and a lot of the education is conducted in person. Well, obviously COVID has impacted that reach. So how can we have Spanish translation? We need help with assistance with Spanish translation of our scheduled electronic communications and resources for the families facing food insecurity. Education and training of our model will be provided. Anyone with intermediate written translation skills desired. This is a perfect thing to ask for right now. This may seem pie in the sky, but trust me, there are a lot of high school and college students and just people who know how to do computer programming, coding. This is the time to maybe create the app that your organization has always wanted. Why don't you recruit virtual coders to help you create that app? Or this is the time to design the website of your dreams, or just edit your current website to add a few of the pages you've always wanted to add. I find myself in this situation too. And so it is about asking for these different virtual volunteers at this time. I talked about this one, but I'm just giving you an example of like reading, writing tutors, special education, 5th grade. This is a virtual opportunity. This is one that I took off of another website. Tutors can be located in any US location. It's a remote position. There's 3 steps: email your resume, complete an application, and call us for a blah, blah, blah. So you can see it's pretty easy to construct a virtual volunteer need. This is another one, my gosh. We all have a database or 5 databases that we use, and it's impossible to keep our databases current, cleaned up, and accurate. It's a constant, never-ending job. Usually staff does this job, but what if you had a volunteer that you trust completely, that you can provide access to your database and instructions, or maybe 2 volunteers that can do this with you. Pro bono skills are obviously really high that you can think of: attorneys, accountants, design engineers, HR, technology, virtual assistants. So I'll give you an example of how we have a particular volunteer. Giving DuPage uses 3 or 4 volunteers interwoven throughout the year. One of them happens to be our accountant. She helps with our bookkeeping. She's amazing. Well, she happens to be a retired senior, and so when COVID struck, we couldn't have her come into the office. We quickly started using her personal. We actually had already set up this volunteer with a Giving DuPage email account, but instead of accessing the remote server and doing all that, this volunteer said, "Can we just use my personal Gmail email?" And we're like, "Great." So she remote logs into the QuickBooks Online. We scan documents for her and we send them over, and she reconciles our books for us. It was just one adjustment that we had to make very quickly, but it's been happening, knock wood, pretty seamlessly since March. Pro bono projects are exactly the kind of projects you should be asking for help for right now. Strategic planning for your board, teaching your staff how to use certain apps like social media calendars, or what about help with your Google Analytics? Wouldn't it be nice to really learn more about how traffic is flowing to your website? What about creating surveys that you've always wanted answers to, or finally converting those paper forms to online fillable forms? What if you could combine learning a new app to converting paper forms to fillable forms and asking a volunteer or different volunteers to do both? I'm going to take a pause there for just a couple of questions and see if there's any new ones that have come up. Okay, so a couple of questions have come through. I'm going to try to go through them. Our efforts to recruit board members have not been successful. Perhaps we're not doing things correctly. I will answer that, George. Thank you for the good reminder. We do offer a board match program, and I have a bit of an update. George, if I for some reason forget, because it matches more in my later conversation, please remind me, please pop into the questions again, but I will give you an update on that. I love the idea of volunteers making thank you calls. We always need to thank our supporters and keep them in touch, but never seem to have the time. Have you ever heard of volunteers who call to thank on behalf of the organizations, but end up recruiting the supporters to another competing organization? I haven't seen that example. That has not come up, but it could happen, right? Like, of course it could happen. We all know that. I would say to you, I wouldn't be so focused on that. Here's the thing: you don't want to miss out on utilizing amazing volunteers to make thank you calls when now is the time to use them. If that happens with a few people, then it happens. But there might also be, it sounds like you might have a concern with certain volunteers, and if they're kind of prone to do that, then I would suggest not using that volunteer for that activity. I would utilize that volunteer for another virtual volunteer idea. But we have not experienced this a lot. I mean, of course it can happen. We know volunteers and people who support our cause support multiple causes, but it has not been an impediment really that I've seen. I'm going to check the chat box too, just to make sure. Okay, nothing there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go on. Here's a couple of safe with space. So I call it safely spaced, but it's your call. These are indoor and outdoor volunteer opportunities. Outdoor seems like we have a short window, maybe a few more weeks before we start seeing some snowy and super cold weather. But we still need help even in the winter months, right? So maybe there's volunteers, maybe you have a driveway at your nonprofit site and you need help with like shoveling or landscaping or raking leaves or planting needs at your site right now. Huge one that will continue through the winter. Volunteer drivers for food recovery, driving people to medical appointments, running errands for seniors, dropping off groceries. There are ways that I think many of the people who use volunteer drivers have already made these adjustments. They've done things like, hey, if I'm dropping off food for seniors, then I'm going to leave the package at the door. I'm going to knock on the door. Or they know it's coming. We're delivering between 11:30 and noon, and then the senior can safely retrieve the package. Or they are allowed, you know, there's some arrangement that's been made. These adjustments have already been happening. Dog walking at an animal shelter, parking lot attendant for maybe some of the food pantries. A lot of the service that's happening with food pantries is happening all in the parking lot, not even coming in to the pantry. What about in your office? Do you have a storage area or files or shelves that need organizing that have been neglected for a long, long time? This is the time to ask for volunteers. This is a great way to use 1 or 2 volunteers and safely spaced apart. And as long as you provide some instruction from a distance, I think this is a worthwhile consideration. One other last but easy and super important set of ideas. Let's not forget that right now, always, advocacy is also volunteerism, but it matters now more than ever, right? We need people advocating for our cause. So what if you started a campaign that involved your long-standing volunteers, your loyal volunteers, 5, 10, 15, 20, 100, I don't know, and you asked them to help you just create awareness for your cause. You don't have to ask them to solicit donations, but what if you ask them to create awareness for your cause? This is how it looks. You, your staff, whomever on your team would create sample social media posts that volunteers can easily copy and paste right into their social networks. You can provide these on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, it's up to you. What if you wrote an article that volunteers can easily edit and share into their company newsletter, school newsletter, house of worship newsletter? What if you send a scripted email that volunteers can share for Giving Tuesday? Volunteers would probably be willing to do it for Giving Tuesday or for donations during the giving season. This is the time for you to write that scripted email so they know exactly, with maybe a few instructions, so they know exactly how to copy and paste that email or edit it for a social media post or both. What if you asked volunteers, what if you went into all your photo files, right? And asked volunteers to share their favorite photos or these photos from their past volunteer experiences on social networks? What if they shared with others what their favorite moments are? What if you decided to create a Zoom video with a volunteer asking them, why did you get involved with our organization? And then you, with their permission, asked if you could use it for a marketing campaign. Here's the thing. You know, I know, we know that whenever people share on social networks, it almost always leads to donations. But even if it doesn't lead to donations, if you had 10 volunteers creating awareness for your organization every month, that's going to generate only positive outcomes, if for no other reason than it will keep your organization front and center with people that you don't know, because the touch points are really happening from your volunteer, right? It's the emails or the friends and family that your volunteers email. It's the people that your volunteers contact on social or post with on social. So they're reaching people that your organization doesn't reach today. And there's no downside to creating awareness for your cause in your organization right now. This is an easy idea that you can do with your volunteers today. I'm just going to pause again for any other questions that are popping in. I think so far so good. All right, so I'm going to take a moment to switch screens here. I want to show you how to post volunteer opportunities, and I see I have about just over 15 minutes left. So this is our volunteer portal. Again, for those who don't know the website, I'll show you the slide, but it's givingdupage.org/volunteer. There's normally you would see a sign-in screen, but I already signed in just for the sake of time. If you don't know your sign-in or your login, please email me. I'm happy to send you that information, or how you can reset your password. It's an easy fix. But this is the screen that you would see when you're logging in. And you will see the name of your organization where it says My Organization, or maybe it'll just say My Organization for you. So this is where you create new volunteer needs. So you click on My Organization here at the top, and then you go ahead and you, gosh, I just want to make sure. I just got an email. Does everyone have sound on the, can somebody give me a quick yes on the questions? I assume yes, because I'm getting questions, so I just am concerned. Okay, everyone can hear fine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate the quick chats. Okay, so you just go ahead and you click on My Organization, and then you can see right below the Organization Manager's Toolbox, you can go to your Opportunities tab. This is in the middle of your screen here. That's a navigation. And you go to Opportunities and you say you want to add a new opportunity. So I'm adding a new opportunity here. I'm looking for a virtual volunteer coaches needed. And then you're going to say blah, 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 and also important, blah, 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 blah. So you're just going to give a quick description. Obviously, you're going to keep it public. Duration of time, you don't have to. I think you can just say ongoing. Hours, you can say an hour. Description, you can add a description if it's for a very specific set time or not. Teams is if you have want to register as a team. Obviously, I think be very careful about this and be very specific in your description on what teams mean. So if you say yes to this, please be clear and say teams of 3 or 4, because I assume you're going to be limiting the number of people who gather. Minimum age, we're going to just go with 16, 76, 16. Maximum age, I'm not going to fill that out. Is it friendly, family friendly? Yes, sure. Is it outdoors? No, it's not. It's virtual. Wheelchair accessible doesn't apply right now. Attributes. So this is anything that you can add. And if you're ever concerned or not, you don't know what a field is asking you, hover over the question mark. These details are displayed at the bottom of the opportunity information page, separately from the opportunity description. You can use this area to have certain details like snacks provided or wear closed-toed shoes. So wear closed-toed shoes, add. Must wear mask, add. Virtual volunteer opportunity. So this is where you'll mark whether it's a virtual one or not. So you want to say yes. The zip code is 60187. And you can say this is a marketing opportunity, or you can also say this is a social opportunity, because if they're a virtual coach, then maybe that's what it is. This is also where you can dedicate something as an in-kind donation need, where you see this right here, or a job. So if this is a job, you can also indicate if this is an advocacy opportunity. Clusters are good to mark if it's something good at, let's say, the holiday time. You can ignore this cluster for virtual. I created that before the vendor, our vendor Galaxy Digital on this app, before they added a virtual opportunity question, I had created that cluster. And then this is additional notification recipients mean, do you need other people in your organization to receive the notice? Yes or no? And then this is also a place where you can upload a waiver. So if you have a waiver form, you can go ahead and upload it. And then you create the opportunity, which we will. And then you can see, I have to go, once it's approved, it'll show up in the opportunities section. If I'm a volunteer user and I come to the site, I don't even have to log in. I can just click on opportunities here in the left navigation, right? I can search on opportunities, events, organizations, jobs, in-kind donation needs. So right here in the opportunities section, if I filter by virtual opportunities and I say, yes, I want to look for virtual opportunities and I search, this is where you're going to see some of those virtual opportunities. You won't see the one I just added because I have to go, as the manager of the overall site, I have to go in and approve it. But so you would see it here after Giving DuPage team approves this particular need. So this is how you add the virtual volunteer need to the opportunity. Happy to send instructions for this afterwards in the follow-up email, but I wanted to just show you live how easy this was to do so that you had the experience on doing it. Incidentally, you can also search organizations. So if your organization profiles are not complete, please go ahead and take the opportunity to do that. Again, don't forget, you can post your events, you can post your nonprofit jobs, and your in-kind donation needs. In-kind donation needs mean, hey, we're taking coats and school supplies for holiday gifts for our clients. We're accepting $10 gas cards for our clients for holidays. We're taking in sports equipment or whatever it is that you're adding in. This is the place to add those needs. Before I switch over, I'm going to just see if there are any questions about adding these particular things. Can we list more than one opportunity at a time? Yes, you can list 20, 30. There are some organizations, I swear, list like 10 or 15 volunteer needs at all times. And they're the ones who get the most engagement because they're posting so many needs. So yes, this is the time to post all of those volunteer needs, the ones that are routine tasks, repetitive tasks, your wish list items, your skills-based ones, everything and anything, now's the time to add those. I'm going to check the chat feature too, just to make sure. I think we're looking good over there. Okay, I'm going to go back to my slide presentation. So don't forget to add keywords and tasks like masks, gloves provided, wipes provided, outdoors. Don't forget to add the holiday cluster because this is the time where Giving DuPage gets contacted a lot for giving back at volunteer time, at holiday time. This is the time to add those needs and tag it with that cluster. If you have any questions on how to post these needs later, please let me know. Happy to do that. Now I'd like to get a little bit into the volunteer engagement and retention section of sort of our program. And I know I only have about 10 minutes left, but there's only a few more slides. This is all about what do you do with the volunteers you've had that have not been back to your site since March? Have you had a chance to check in with your volunteers? Do you know if they need help or assistance with food, rent, medications, mental health support, testing? If they do need help, maybe you can recruit another different volunteer to help your volunteer. Remember, at the top of this program, I said that you'll have to do a little bit more work right now to engage the best volunteers your organization has had. This is what it looks like. You have to go above and beyond. You might have to recruit volunteers for other volunteers. If they need help with food, rents, medications, the county has an information referral website called DuPage CRIS, DuPageCRIS.org. Please refer people to that website. It's easy to navigate. for anybody who needs help with anything from legal to housing to food to children's resources, anything. That's where you can go. Alternatively, if you have to, you can ask people to call the county's information referral line. DuPage County Health Department has a crisis hotline 24/7 year-round. This is that phone number. Please encourage people, including your volunteers who need help with mental health support, to contact that particular phone number. For the time being, this may change, but there's also free COVID testing being offered through the health department right at the county's complex in Wheaton off of County Farm Road at the fairgrounds. There are obviously many other testing sites that you can Google and search for, and I think the health department also lists other sites. Setting up a monthly touch point with your volunteers, especially if you've had a lot of volunteers in the past, you can establish some sort of schedule. So this is really important. Connecting with your volunteers every so often. If you had a lot of volunteers, or if your organization was volunteer heavy, you may want to think about doing something small every single month. Maybe sending postcards at the holiday time. Maybe sending a Happy New Year email in January. Maybe sending a Valentine by mail in February. What if you found a good limerick or a green food recipe for St. Patrick's Day in March? You get the idea, right? It doesn't take a lot. I mean, it's extra effort, no question about it, at a time when you're tapped to the max. But it's all about how important are volunteers to your organization, and what can you do to engage them when they haven't seen you or talked to you or come to your organization in 6, 8, 9 months. What can you do with them? Don't forget to engage your board. They too are volunteers. Ask them to get involved with the volunteer engagement. Ask them to call your volunteers with gratitude calls. Hey, you're not able to volunteer right now, but you are not forgotten. What if you have 10 board members and each of your board members takes 3 to 5 calls apiece and calls your volunteers? I guarantee you your board members will be happy to be doing something meaningful, and your volunteers will feel so touched. Also, come up with a plan to engage your board outside of asking them for extra help. So maybe that's adding something useful onto your Zoom board meeting call. Maybe that's setting up a separate, a lot of us have board engagement dinners that we do every year, so thank you dinners to our board. Maybe you set up some clever new idea to say thank you to your board. The bottom line is looking for ways to create mini volunteer recognition and gratitude moments so that you can keep your very best volunteers engaged and retained. Here's our look going forward. What does volunteer engagement look like in 2021, in 2022? This is the mantra, which I think we all know by now: hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. Are you communicating regularly with volunteers? Do your volunteers even know if you're open, if you're closed? What changes are you preparing for this winter? These are the people who are your important advocates, so communicate often. Trust me, it won't be often too much for them, I promise you. What if public safety concerns remain, or if continued surge in cases go up in the next 6 months, 12 months, and beyond? What's your plan? What if your volunteers don't return even when public health concerns are allayed or better managed or controlled? What if only 10% of your volunteers or 25% of your volunteers will return? How will you attract new volunteers? What safety measures will become permanent in your operations? Think about that, especially if you're a very volunteer-heavy organization and you have traditionally in the past had 25, 30, 40, 50 volunteers at your pantry or at your warehouse. What kind of measures will become permanently embedded into your operations going forward? And do you have to plan expenses for them? Do you have to add line items in your annual budget for supplies of PPE, additional laptops for virtual volunteers? Whatever, it could be anything. The budget expenses, what if you need to do more marketing or advertising to get new volunteers, to recruit new volunteers? The whole name of the game is to make a plan now and adjust any plans you make as needed. More on looking ahead. So volunteerism, redefine and looking ahead. recruiting younger and millennial volunteers. Interestingly enough, a lot of the things that you would do to try to attract or recruit younger millennial volunteers are the same kinds of things that you have to do to adjust in this new remote and virtual workspace. You have to create more micro volunteer experiences. You have to create more digital volunteer experiences. For millennials, you definitely have to curate more social and fun experiences, and you definitely have to use more social media just to recruit them. Engage the employers of millennials. Millennials are 65% more likely to get involved if their coworkers, team, supervisors participate. They're 77% more likely to volunteer if you use their specific skill sets. Definitely make your cause and your organization information visible and accessible. Don't forget, this is the generation that will not call people for information. They just go research it and find it online. If your cause and your organization's information is not accessible and visible, they're not going to reach out to you and be interested in signing up. Create a lot of positive experiences. So generation, this is like the review generation, right? This is a generation of people that grew up on Yelp and Google reviews. So if you don't create a positive volunteer experience, they're not likely to come back to your organization. And this is definitely the organization that's all about video and photos, right? It is the Instagram, Snapchat culture. You have to be willing to tell personal stories about your organization and its impact. And you have to tell stories about how this young millennial got involved and volunteered. Volunteer engagement in 2021 and 2022, it's going to be about innovation and creativity. You have to, like we all have been, using new tools, new apps, new supplies that we never had to use before or think about before. If you have volunteer manuals on hand, you're going to have to define what safety means, whether it includes CDC guidelines, current county health department warnings. You have to, you might have to edit and ask for agreeing to on-site safety checks or temperature checks. You might have to add a waiver into your volunteer manual or volunteer sign up that volunteers agree to contact tracing if they're exposed to any risk. That you're going to have clearly defined protocols if someone contracts the virus, and making sure that staff knows what those protocols are as well. I'm going to take a pause there and just check on questions really quickly. I know we're at closing time. Can we post something like a turkey drive? Yes, you can definitely post a turkey drive. No question, this is by far one of the most helpful webinars. Well, thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate it. George asked about board engagement, so let me get to those slides. But a couple of last slides really quickly, folks. The volunteer program at your organization will be vastly different from before, and it will be okay. I promise it will be okay. It's just going to be different. And as long as you can accept and embrace that, we can all turn the page to something better. And here's the good news. Your loyal, long-standing volunteers are a great place to ask for input. Have them help you shape your future and give you great ideas. By the way, when you ask for a focus group with your long-standing volunteers, that too is a virtual volunteer opportunity. It's going to be up to all of us to educate others on how volunteerism is redefined. I just had to do this on the call and the meeting I was on before. I'm talking to a bunch of chamber members, and I had to remind them, hey, volunteering is not traditional volunteering. I used to come in a group of 50 and volunteer. Nope, volunteering is all going to be mostly online, remote, and virtual. And it's all up to all of us to educate others on how volunteerism is being redefined. Here's how Giving DuPage is prepared to support you. On social networks, we are fortunate right now to have marketing support to post volunteer and in-kind donation needs on Monday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. The trick is you have to post it to the portal. If it's not on the portal, we don't promote it. It's a rotating schedule, and we try to give visibility to all the different opportunities we see. We have a community care e-newsletter that goes out to a broader community of 13,000 email subscribers. Gosh, I wish it was 13 million. At least every other month we try to do that. It's a very brief listing, so be prepared for that. We have, if you may have seen, if you use the portal often, we send communications through the portal. We share messages. We share information on donation drives. We highlight organizations. And we are sending that to about 5,000 volunteers and users. I don't know if you know this, but our Giving DuPage volunteer portal is mirrored on North Central College's volunteer portal. So they just have their North Central College branding, but all of the same volunteer needs that are on our portal are automatically carried through to their portal. It's double the exposure. You enter it once, it goes 2 places. We're also in the process of forming a DuPage, and we're calling it a generically Youth Service Council, but really what we're trying to do is connect higher ed institutions to local community organizations and local community needs. We also have a board match program, which I didn't put on here, but George, it really is, we're going to be doing more around the board match and recruitment. We are actually enlisting a volunteer to help us be a volunteer program manager to oversee that program so that they can, their #1 job is to recruit more potential board members. So if you've submitted an application as a nonprofit organization in the past, hang in there for me. I'm trying to get this virtual volunteer in place as quickly as possible. And we've also applied, we're going to be applying for some grants, so we hope to get some more support around virtual volunteering and our board match program. I can't guarantee that we can get you a board match. We can only do our best, but if you don't fill out an application, we don't know that you need a board member. If you don't know what that program is, feel free to email us. These are some important updates and events that we have coming up. This is the last slide before my contact info. Again, promoting volunteer needs on social and Facebook posts. This one's really huge. Please, I'm going to send this in the post follow-up email. We are conducting a nonprofit survey. We need at least another 100 survey replies to have a meaningful sample size, given that we partner with over 400 organizations. We did get about 60 replies, but I would feel better if we got another 75 to 100 replies. So please, please take time to fill out this nonprofit survey. Your feedback is hugely critical, and my Giving DuPage board is very eager to receive your feedback. Executive Director Network, we're going to be doing an after-hours social hour. This is for executive directors only on November 17th. For those who don't know, we've partnered with NIU and their Civic Leadership Academy. We have many classes. This link will take you to the details and registration. In January, we have a 2-part series on grant writing. Other classes include negotiation skills, critical thinking, budgeting, and understanding financial statements. And in June, we have a 2-part executive director training. Also, we have dates set for Giving DuPage Days. What is Giving DuPage Days? It is a multi-charity virtual fundraiser that we hosted for the first time this year. It was a spin-off of our DuPage Human Race event. So instead of meeting in a 5K in person, we held a virtual fundraiser this year, and we raised over $229,000 for 80 charities. The dates for next year in 2021 are April 26th to 30th. We were able to get 51% new donors to the different charities. Your nonprofit registration participation fee, if you are a DuPage-based organization, is $100, and the donation split is 90-10, 90% going to your organization, 10% coming to Giving DuPage. Early December, you'll have a recorded presentation about this event and commonly asked FAQs. Early January is when the nonprofit registration opens, and it will close early February. There will be only 1 month to register and be a part of this event. And in February, March, and April, we'll be hosting training webinars on the keys to success that will take place. I think that's everything. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think this shows up really well. It's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. I quote him often. Dr. King said, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." And I think that's very appropriate. I'm sorry it didn't appear well. In my slides it did, but I guess when you convert it to a PDF, it didn't show up as well. I'll send it in the post email follow-up. I know I've gone a little bit long here, but I just want to check in and see if there's any other questions. Yes, I'll be sharing my slides for sure. Kate, thank you for answering questions. Asma, yep, definitely encourage you to utilize the portal more often. Yes, please do. Thank you all. I appreciate your feedback. Appreciate the positive comments I'm seeing. Feel free to ask any questions. Keep posting your questions in the chat. I'll stick around for a few more minutes. But if you have to bounce out, I completely understand. And if you have to get going and on to your day, but feel free to post any questions that you may have. Thank you everyone for joining us. You'll get the post webinar email with the recording and slides and follow up from us on a couple of things all at once today. Thanks for your participation. Thank you, everyone. Please be well and be safe. Thanks, everyone. Of course, I'm hanging around, so feel free to put questions in the chat if you have any. Thanks for the kind words, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for the positive feedback.